You're watching Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz. I'm glad you're still with us as we continue our travels up and down the state of California. Today we are in Victorville and we are joined by Keith Jones. He is with the Department of Environmental Health for the County of Riverside, focusing specifically on vector control. What is vector control?
Well, Brad, a simple explanation for a vector is an organism such as a mosquito, an insect, an animal that has the ability to transmit disease to us or other animals such as horses.
And so when we think about mosquitoes, we think about Lyme's disease, we think about West Nile virus, we think about malaria from 100 years ago, although it's still active in Africa. When we think about the Inland Empire, Southern California, are there certain threats that concern you and as a result should concern Californians generally?
Absolutely. Just a note, Lyme's disease is transmitted via a tick rather than mosquito.
That's true.
But you're absolutely correct. In Riverside County and up and down the state, we do have certain public health threats that we're on the lookout for. We have Lyme disease, we have West Nile virus, we have plague, we have...
Plague?
Yes, we do.
Plague?
Yes, we do.
The bubonic plague?
We have hantavirus. Those are the diseases that all of our vector control programs are on the lookout for, doing surveillance for, and doing control.
And what is it about the mosquito? I mean, I know Lyme's is through the tick. My aunt got Lyme, so I'm familiar with it. But what is it about the mosquito that makes it such an outstanding transmitter of these horrific diseases?
Well, mosquitoes are difficult to control. They basically need a water source, and the eggs develop into larvae and emerge as an adult mosquito. And not every mosquito can give us a disease. It's basically the female mosquito that needs a blood meal to lay in the eggs, and only certain species have the ability to transmit disease to humans.
So what will happen, as I understand it, is a mosquito will bite an infected animal, such as
a crow, a sparrow. Primarily, as far as West Nile virus goes, we know that's in our wild bird populations in Southern California. So if a female mosquito of the right species feeds on an infected bird, they have the potential to transmit that disease to us or a horse.
And it happens. I mean, I remember I was mentioning to you, I think it was back in 2008, there was a West Nile virus outbreak, and I remember going to a vector control facility and watching an autopsy of a crow, and sure enough, the physician said, look, this is an inflamed liver. This means this crow is infected. And this means if this crow, it had died.
Right.
But if it had, not, a mosquito could have bitten it and then transmitted it to us. How does a vector control program get funded?
Well,
because they're county programs, they're public programs.
They are typically either a county environmental health or health department program or a special district, a mosquito abatement district, vector control district. Traditionally, these programs have been funded through the county with the general fund or general property tax dollars. Over the last decade, there's been a big shift, especially in Riverside County. A lot of those general property tax dollars are needed to keep sheriff deputies on the streets, keep fire stations open, and put criminals behind bars. So we know those are very important core government services, and we respect that. But it puts the lower visibility public health and safety programs like vector control in a challenge to find alternative sources of funding, and this is what we're trying to do in Riverside County. It's pretty much been done up and down the state, so we can't claim to be an innovator with this measure.
But that may be good, that you're not breaking ground on seeking a new funding source. So let's talk about how a control program can do that. What are the options?
Okay, well, thankfully, our Board of Supervisors has allowed us to work with a consulting team, and they are educating us on this process. We really couldn't do it on our own.
Of course.
So they have basically done a survey within our service area, and based on the survey results, they've given us direction on the proposed rate and depending on the service zones in the area.
And let's talk about that, because Riverside County, we know the inland county is very large, and you, likewise, the Riverside County Vector Control Program covers a very large area geographically.
Absolutely.
It goes all the way from Temecula to
Basically, the service area that we're speaking of today
Right.
is the central portion of the county, all the way from the unincorporated Temecula area up into the unincorporated Banning-Beaumont Pass. So that entire corridor within Riverside County, it covers about 2,000 square miles and a population of approximately 240,000.
And so you are going to the voters of that area. But it's unique. You're only going to the voters in the unincorporated portions of that area. Do you want to explain that, or is it a little too inside baseball?
No, I'd be happy to explain that. And basically what we're doing is we're following Proposition 218 proceedings. So it's not the registered voters and it's not a general election. The ballots will be mailed out to property owners within our service area because the property owners are the ones that are going to be asked to pay for these services. Not all registered voters may own property.
They're not impacted.
So this is the proven method to proceed, and we do have 10 service contracts with the cities within our area. The cities basically pay us for the services that we provide directly. That is not happening in the unincorporated areas.
And so, oh, I see. So that's why you need to go to those unincorporated zones, because you need funding.
Absolutely.
Because the county has had to shift funding away from vector control.
Absolutely.
Okay, so ballots are being mailed. That is actually a new trend. You're not going to be holding an in-poll election where you have to actually go. You're going to mail ballots to the property owners.
Yes.
Explain that process. How will that work?
Well, basically the ballots have been developed by the consulting team. The board will give the approval to have those ballots mailed, and when the property owners receive these ballots in the mail, it'll be clearly identified. This is important. There'll be some red ink on the front envelope, and it'll have our identification. There'll be a information booklet so they can find if you're you don't have the viewers right now that see this. If there's someone who hasn't seen the segment, we just want people to be informed when they make that vote.
Right, and the key is it's the property owners who need to vote. The ballots must be received at some point in the end of July, mid-end of July. The date is still to be determined.
Correct.
And for this election, 50% plus one, not a 2/3 vote. I guess that's pursuant to Prop 218?
That's correct, yes. And there's an independent tabulator that will receive these ballots. They won't be counted up by myself or my department or the county.
Right, that's it. So it's not the county. It's a
absolutely.
completely separate election that's done independently.
Right.
So look, I mean, when you talk about voter turnout, voter turnout has been dropping, let's say, dramatically.
Sure.
I have to think it's going to be a challenge to get voters to recognize and realize that this is an election that's happening. It's through the mail. And it's important. I mean, look, we don't have malaria outbreaks.
True.
We don't have Lyme's disease like they have in Connecticut or
Northern California has
which is where my aunt. Yeah, that's where my aunt caught it. So, these issues aren't on top of mind. But tomorrow, we could have a West Nile virus outbreak. And West Nile virus, I mean, you lose kids, you lose the elderly. I mean, it's scary.
Right. And we know that West Nile virus is our primary concern, and it has been for the last decade here in Southern California, but we've also heard of some emerging diseases and the species of mosquitoes that have the potential to transmit dengue fever, chikungunya. Those mosquitoes are here.
Come on.
They just haven't been proven to transmit those diseases locally.
Do we know if they have the diseases? Are they carrying the diseases?
That hasn't been proven. The cases that have been documented in California have been determined to be imported cases. People that have traveled abroad.
I see.
And then come back.
But let's face it. I mean,
symptoms.
people are traveling abroad all the time.
More and more these days.
And if someone comes in with dengue fever, gets bit by a mosquito, they can then transmit it to someone local. Is that right?
That is the concern. Yes.
Okay, so if you live in Riverside County, in an unincorporated area, please know that ballots are in the mail. And it could also be other vector control programs that are doing the same thing. Like you said, you're not an innovator in this case.
True.
And the key is that the ballots must be returned by the end of July. The date will be on the ballot.
Yes.
I want to thank you, Keith, so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's an interesting issue, an important issue, and one that we really need to pay attention to because it's our health. It's our health. His name is Keith Jones. He is with the Riverside County Environmental Health Department. My name is Brad Pomerantz. In Victorville, it's California Edition.